Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Chelsea. I'm the Director of Outreach for MADVoters. I'm so excited for you to be here tonight. We're going to be talking about education. We have 5 amazing panelists, and we're so excited to hear from them. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with Sarah. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Blessing. I am running for State House Rep in District 70, which is all of Harrison County where I live, and a big chunk of Washington, some of Floyd, and some of Clark. It's a heavy gerrymandered rural area. And I am a former teacher. I taught mostly 5th grade for 18 years at a Catholic school, and I have seen the impact of vouchers. And my 3 children attend public schools right in Harrison County, and they are wonderful schools that I am working very hard to try to protect.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Carrie, please.
Hi, my name is Carrie Mixa. I am a board member of Indiana Coalition for Public Education. I am not running for office, but the topic is education. So I am here just to help answer questions if we're stumbling. And the one thing I wanted to point out before we continue is that we do have a candidate pledge where candidates can come to our site and pledge support of public education and public education funding. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for telling us about the pledges. I think everybody needs to take this whole thing seriously with public education. So I definitely encourage any candidates to look at those endorsements and really take those seriously. Trish, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trish Whitcomb. I live in Seymour, Indiana. I am running for House District 69. My opponent is Jim Lucas, who crows about being the champion of school choice. So you can imagine how we are 180 from each other. I was a classroom teacher. I was a special ed teacher. I also taught, I had a teaching assistantship at the University of Wyoming for graduate school. And then I returned to Butler for a graduate certificate in applied neuroscience and education. I worked at the Indiana Department of Education when Glenda Ritz was the superintendent, and I was her special advisor. And my role there was to be a liaison with the superintendents and principals and people like that, but also to do some special projects. And our biggest one was Hoosier Family of Readers. So I'm kind of knee deep in education issues and so happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Trish, so much. Gail, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gail Cosby. I have a few hats that I'm wearing this evening. I am here to represent the Indianapolis Ed Justice Coalition. And so that's kind of one capacity that I'm going to be speaking from this evening. I additionally am a candidate as well. I am seeking a seat on the Indianapolis Public School Board. This is the same seat that I held 2012 through 2016. I'm returning after completing a doctorate in urban education studies. And I am currently serving as the program chair for the education program at Ivy Tech's Indianapolis campus downtown. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Thank you. Robert, please introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Robert Pope. I'm running for House District 40. I'm also actually twice elected to Avon's Town Council. And so my House district more or less sits right on top of just my Avon Schools District. It does have a few precincts down in Plainfield School District, but 95% of my district is Avon Schools. I think I am the least qualified to speak on education amongst these panelists. You ladies all bring a wealth of knowledge to this. My passion to education stems from, one, my own upbringing and experience, as well as raising my kids and bringing them to Avon schools. But study after study has shown us that the highest return on investment across industries, across policy, across anything, is investing in education. And I want nothing more than to build a better future for Hoosiers. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like we all heard the call, right? So thank you guys so much for being here. We're going to get right into it. So I'm going to bring it up because this is, I think, something that is on everybody's mind, is these new diploma requirements. These are scary. For those of you guys who are not aware of the new requirements, we are allowing high schoolers to graduate with less credits. That's what it boils down to. They will have less credits graduating, which means they are not going to be able to go straight into college. They will have to get credits through a community college, through some kind of coursework, and that is going to slow down their ability to get into higher education. Am I right?
You are correct.
Would any of you guys like to share your thoughts on these new requirements?
I want to reiterate, I feel I'm the least qualified genuinely to speak to this. I'm not an educator. I'm a software engineer, trained to be a software engineer and a soldier. But I want to share this perspective. I feel like I have watched year after year the legislature continue to erode the quality of education, the funding of education, bill after bill. It seems intentional to me. The goal being to undermine and just reduce the quality of education and therefore the future of Indiana. For example, these graduation requirements are not going to prepare them for higher education. They're not going to prepare them for an actual high quality, high paying job in the workforce. Go back last year, the year before, the book fees, reducing or taking away book fees from parents sounds on the surface wonderful, but every single school district just took one heck of a pay cut. What are these school boards going to do? Many of them will reduce the quality of the books so that they can bring in or purchase cheaper books, lower the quality of those books. And what will that do? Will have a negative impact on the education that they can teach. Software engineer side of me says that's a feature, not a bug. That's the intent. And these new requirements seem right on line with that ethos, with that thought process.
I get you. I hear you. That was
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, what do you guys see is going to be the consequences of these changes?
One thing that I would share, from where I sit as a program chair at a community college, over the years, I've gotten a lot of students that are non-traditional, that, they've gotten out there, they've gotten into a different career and, kind of set their passion for teaching to the side and returned to that later in life and said, hey, I didn't go down the right career path to begin with, but I really want to be a teacher. So I might get a 28, 29-year-old. I've had the privilege of teaching people my own age, that have decided after many years to pursue a second or third career as a teacher. And so my concern with this new diploma system is that it seems very limiting to students that might find themselves in those types of situations later in life where they have taken a different career path and, kind of locked in to this reality of then not being able to, meet admission requirements for a university later in life. What my question to that situation would be, what would they then need to do to become eligible to attend college later in life? So that's one concern. Additionally, I would say that, as an educator, and I spent many years in K through 12 before I transitioned over into higher ed. And just from my own experience as a student, we need more offerings in schools, not less. My concern about narrowing the the offerings for students. I didn't go to school for English or math. I didn't, look forward, as many students obviously don't, to standardized testing. I liked social studies, I liked band, I liked athletics, you know, and so as we talk about narrowing the curricular offerings even further, I think what we will inadvertently find as an unintended consequence is that we see more dropouts. We see less students interested in attending school because they don't have a hook. They don't have something that they can become passionately engaged in and, you know, find their creativity, find their joy within the walls of a school building. And to echo, you know, Robert's point, I feel like, you know, there's elements of this that are exploitative, you know, in terms of forcing high school kids to get out into the workforce. And the thing that I don't see folks talking about a lot is what might be the implications on the economy for that short term if we are infusing a bunch of free labor into, you know, an already stressed job market.
Can I raise one additional point to that? That is I see this because of my time on town council. I have roughly 3,500 students in just my high school. Call half of them will meet this requirement junior, senior year, need to go out into the workforce. Give me 1,700 students. I don't have 1,700 jobs available in my
That's
community.
exactly what I was going to say.
I have no idea where they're expecting this flood of labor to come to. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Gail.
Well, and
Yeah.
also I will add to what Robert's saying. This is a big concern for me. We don't have places down here in Southern Indiana. Sarah, you know this too. We just do not have places that are safe and suitable for students, and B, where they're really going to learn something that they can take someplace else. And the other thing I am very concerned about is one of the programs that I worked on when I was at the department with Glenda was the Unified Campaign to Combat Sex Abuse of School-Age Girls. I am very concerned about unsupervised conduct for young men and young women in a workplace with a lot of adults. I'm sorry, they should be in school. They should be among their peers. They should be exploring, not exploited. And so that's my 2 cents.
I was going to build off of what Gail said in terms of dropout. The way that there's this core 20 that Boehning has been trying to push for a while, and some other legislators, and it really kind of front loads your academic courses to your first 2 years of high school. And a lot of kids who attend high school don't attend high school because of their English language or their English class or their math class. They go because of band or because of another elective. And it's kind of like, how are you going to entice these kids to stay those 2 years because something more exciting may come to them that they believe is exciting their junior or senior year. And, you know, and then you also have, you know, education doesn't exist in a bubble. We have weakening of child labor laws happening in our state and other states to consider. And also we have a guidance counselor shortage. We have the worst ratio, I believe, in all 50 states. Like 1 to 600 plus students for guidance counselors. And the way that this system is set up, it really requires like a life coach to get you through. It's much more complicated. My child, he's a junior now in high school, will sit in a class of, 25, 30 kids and choose her courses that way with a guidance counselor. She never really gets a one-on-one with them. So there's a bit of concern in regards to we are putting the cart before the horse kind of thing with this idea. I know that they're trying to work in seals. I was at the last school state board meeting about this. And so they're just adding more cooks to the kitchen, trying to figure this out and taking something that was supposed to be more simple, and it's becoming more and more complex. It's not ready. When I spoke at that meeting, not the July 30th one, but the one prior, the one thing I asked was that you just need more time. This needs more time. It's not ready. Even with the next round of changes that are going to come out, there are just so many people involved in this process that an extension needs to be made, even though it's a law. you know, sometimes laws need to be broken. And I know IDOE sometimes is very late on things that are laws. So anyway, that's all I got right now.
Really good points, really great points. Thank you guys so much. And so while we're talking about kind of like rolling these things back, do you guys remember the legislation that was put forward where they were cutting back training for teachers? Things like how to spot abuse, how to stop heavy bleeding, seizure care, things like that. How concerned does that make you? To kind of see them like rolling back, because we've also seen that you can be a substitute teacher without even a high school diploma, right? And so it's like little by little, we're kind of chipping away at what makes a school a safe space.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what education was like when I first started. I'm 43. When I was a senior at IUS, and I did my student teaching in a 6th grade for Mount Tabor in New Albany, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. We had a team of teachers, 3 classrooms, a bunch of special ed teachers and extra assistants, and there was just so much help. And we had a lot of students that had special needs, and they were all getting their needs met. I mean, it was incredible. And I was kind of blown away by it. But this was in like 2003. And this was when we had a different state government, and they funded public education. And I remember supporting special needs was big at that time. And since then, it's just been a chipping away. And now you have one less assistant, and now you have a little bit less money. And it's just been like every year, just a little bit less. They just keep taking away and taking away. And now we literally cannot lose anything else. And we know what the legislators, you know, what their plans are. They've said the quiet parts out loud. They want public education to fail. These are the things they are doing to make it fail. And we have to shine a light on it and say, stop it. Our kids deserve better.
100%. I will say while we're on the call and talking about education, this is something that excites us about our MVP, Jennifer McCormick, who is our gubernatorial candidate. She has been our superintendent when it was an elected position. It was taken away as an elected position. God forbid somebody does a good job in that position, right? And so like we do seem to have a lot of people on the ballot who are very dedicated to making sure that these children receive a safe, equitable education. And so that makes me feel really great as a Hoosier. So thank you guys for that. And I think that we're starting to see people, as we give them the information about what's really happening behind the scenes, they are starting to come to the realization that it's not teachers, you know, it's not that we have schools full of horrible teachers, it's that we have schools full of teachers that are getting no support. And so what do you guys feel is going to be, I guess, your next move in this progressive space? Like, if you are running for office, is this something that is going to be kind of at the forefront of what you're doing? If you are heading up an organization or working with an organization, what are some next moves that you can speak of that your organization might be doing?
Chelsea, the Indiana Justice Coalition is just in the practice of holding our local school system accountable to the greatest extent possible. But to kind of go back to your previous point, I think that and again, something Robert said, I think that we have to connect the dots for our constituents and keep them informed to the degree that they begin to understand that this is not a series of unrelated accidents, right? And so when we think about the fact that, teachers are getting less support, the requirements are less stringent, we see the attack on public education as multi-pronged to the degree that, if the educational requirements for teaching are less stringent, that creates kind of a vacuum where then we can have special interest groups step in to provide this gap, right? And this is what has happened with, you know, Teach for America as an organization that has, you know, recruited people from all over to kind of fill this gap of teaching. So none of it is accidental. It's all by design. I know we're going to talk a bit more about teacher salary, again, another piece of the puzzle, right? And so if we make teaching this unappealing profession that discourages young people from entering the field, then we've got a vacuum. Then we can, you know, create ways to fill the vacuum. We've outsourced, at least I'm speaking from my local wheelhouse of experience in Indianapolis, we've outsourced, you know, most of the additional or ancillary functions of education. So substitute teaching, outsourced. We don't handle that in-house anymore. We have this other company that does it. We don't really handle our own transportation anymore. We've hired that out. We've seen, you know, janitorial services, like textbooks, like all the things that kind of contribute to this big business of education. And I think what we need to be aware of is that our lawmakers and the people in power are, you know, I see it as their primary job nowadays is just to create policy that supports that system, that business, that, you know, that industry that has been created to dismantle what was once so strongly held in the public domain, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. So since you brought it up, let's just move right on to teacher pay and benefits. You know, at MADVoters, we posted a graphic recently talking about teacher pay and how that matches up to inflation. And people were absolutely blown away. It was shared thousands of times across our social media. And I mean, people were just like, holy crap, when you put the numbers together and you show the difference in inflation, it really tells a story about how we are mistreating our teachers. And so if you guys want to talk about that, Gail, I know you said that that was a big piece of it. Please, if you want to explain further, we'd love to hear that.
Well, first I'll say thank you for that. I think that the fact that that went viral made that a topic of conversation in many circles. I saw a lot of folks on social media discussing that weren't necessarily even in the typical educational circles. So that was a powerful message that you got out, and I want to say thanks for that. I would say that, you know, we see efforts that have been directed toward breaking the backs of teachers, period, and teachers unions as well. When I served on the IPS board the first time, which was 2012 to 2016, in the very beginning of my term in 2012, I saw the dismantling of what we used to call the step and lane system of teacher compensation benefits, right? And so the step and lane was years of experience and then the level of the teacher's education that went away. So we're talking about 10 to 12 years ago in one of the largest public districts in the state that ceased to exist. And you know, we've seen, because there have been such teacher shortages, we've seen some kind of temporary or stopgap measures to try to, you know, recruit folks in the interim and in the meantime. But with the loss of a really strong, you know, pay structure, and with the union being cut off at the knees in a lot of ways, you know, it's not as appealing of a career as it used to be, unfortunately. But again, I'll just continue to say this to you all. It's no accident. And I'm glad for all of you that are in the room. I may be preaching to the choir, but the more that we can kind of unify that message and help folks to understand that this is an intentional attack on public education, I think the the stronger our election cycle will be this time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gail. And I want to point out what Katie said in the chat. If you are somebody who likes statistics, Indiana ranks 41st in teacher salaries. And if you look, Katie also put some information in the chat talking about the decrease in average pay from 2002 to 2020 was 18.9% when we're talking about the addition of inflation. That is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. And, you know, I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and many of them don't have children in the public school system, right? Well, I'm here to tell them that we need relief. It's not that we're just sending in these bad teachers. It's that we are being cut down at the knees, right? And so it's really important for you to really understand what's happening and get the information and not cast stones and make judgments about these teachers who are giving their all for these students. Many people don't know school is sometimes the safest place for these kids. And so the legislation that we've been seeing about like outing kids and things like this is incredibly dangerous. This is not what Hoosiers want. We want legislation that's going to give us relief at the gas pump and is going to give us relief on our utility bills and is going to give us healthcare and quality education. We're not looking to legislate children away. And so, you know, people need to understand that school is a safe space for kids, and these teachers are raising these children like they're their own children. And they need support doing that because we can't always count on parents to fill in those gaps. And these teachers are trying so hard to do that. And so thank you to any teachers that are listening or who will watch this later. We really appreciate what you've been doing. Keep up the good work. We're all in this together. We got this. Before I move on to another topic, would anybody else like to say anything about this, about the teacher pay benefits and how that's going?
Can I just say something like in general, though?
Yeah.
When we did Glenda's campaign, our polling told us that only 11% of voters were connected to public education, either through their family or being a teacher or whatever. And her strength did come from the Indiana Public Education Coalition for Public Education and from teachers and from the teachers union, writing postcards, all that stuff. The same is pretty much true now because Jennifer was very kind in sharing some information with us from her statewide poll. And when you look at the, you know, make or break single issue voter, there's only 18% who even broadly care about education. So I'm with you on all of this. I think you guys know all of that. But when we talk to voters, I will tell you my biggest success at the door is saying this phrase. When they, especially if they say, no, I don't have any concerns, which thank you for opening the door to me. Well, are you concerned that dollars that are supposed to be spent in our local public schools are being sent to rich families in Indianapolis who make $220,000 to send their kids to private schools? And that is it. And that is the truth. And people go ballistic. So we need to get elected. We all care about all this stuff in public education, the teacher shortage, the counselor shortage, all the stupid rules they have about kids, but we need to get elected. And so if I could just share that experience with you about what is working with, and I'm only talking to Republicans at the door. That's all, that's the only people I talk to are Republicans. When they hear that, you know, and I do say, we have a few local schools here. We have St. Ambrose, we have Lutheran Trinity, we have, you know, where these kids get vouchers, but I don't think any of their parents make $220,000. Do you? And they're all like, hell no. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox, but I'll tell you what, we need to get elected. We need to show people the problems. We need to educate them, and we need to expose what's happening and tell them that we won't do that. We will pull that back. So that's it. I'm sorry, it's all
Yeah.
together,
Sure.
you know, it's the teacher
Trish,
pay.
that's such a,
everything.
yeah, it's such a good point where it really boils down to your tax dollars and how much of your tax dollars are going elsewhere and not to your local schools, because people don't like paying taxes in the first place. But at ICPE, we're partnering with KEEP, which is the Center for Education and Evaluation Policy at IU. And we are also working with Phil Downs, who works on like this, like, you know, that big spreadsheet that shows the money that should go to your school district, but instead goes to vouchers. And we're visualizing it. So it's going to be a map, drop it down, find your school, and then it will show you a graph of the money that could potentially be in your school district year after year. And how it affects every school district in this state, because the money comes from the state. Doesn't leave your school district. The money comes from the state. And if we didn't have that voucher program and we kept funding the same, there would be such an increase in funding for every school district. You know, and now because we're up to funding, you know, those $220,000 earning families, the amount lost to, you know, some of these really big school districts, it's in the millions. It's insane. And so, yeah, hopefully that will be unveiled, we hope, August 24th at our state meeting. Anyone's invited. It's on Zoom, and it will also be in person up on the north side of Indianapolis. And then hopefully after that, there'll be a link to find it, and candidates can use it to help support their campaign. Yeah.
Amazing. I just want to jump in and say thank you for that, because when we work together to get this information out to the public, that's when we really make the change. So thank you. I look forward to using that feature.
Yeah, I wanted to get, I've been watching that data for years, and I'm like, it just needs to be visualized. It needs to be, because people don't want to look at spreadsheets. No one likes a spreadsheet, except for a few folks, but.
I wanted to talk about what Trish was saying when talking to voters, because I'm doing a lot of that too. And when she's saying education isn't an issue, that it's one of their main concerns, is because they don't know. That is the problem statewide with everything. Our state government works so incredibly hard to keep everything from us. Just look up stuff yourself. It's way harder. You think you can just search on Google and find out how things are and find out the truth, and it is not that easy. I have asked for state records, county records, public records. You don't have to, they don't send them unless you have money and you can sue for them. And just like the actual laws being passed, they're not made so that everyday people can follow what they're doing in that state house when it starts up in January. I mean, that is a big problem, and that's something that I'm hoping I can help with if I can ever get elected. We need transparency so that the people whose, you know, our taxes are going to the state house, that this money is going towards things we are actually aware of. And most people do not know the damage that is being done with our money. Thanks.
Absolutely. I think that's why we make them nervous, because we're taking that language and we're breaking it down and making it much easier to understand, because they don't want us to be able to find it. And when we find it, they don't want us to be able to understand it. And then, you know, people don't realize there are a lot of holes in Indiana legislation. These things, they're not written well. And so it really depends on who's reading it, how that's going to be, you know, put into place. So it's a really big problem here. And that is something that MADVoters is trying to do. We see the candidates and the other organizations really pushing this information out. And so, I mean, things are coming together in Indiana. We are working together. We are pushing out information, and we are making big steps in the right direction. So I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Katie is putting so much information in the chat and sharing all kinds of documents with everybody. So please take advantage of the information. You know, take some notes if you need to. Lots of great stuff. But yeah, looking at the vouchers and being able to like really see that really makes a difference. We actually used Dr. Downs' information last year and did some graphics that said, like, this is the county, these are the schools, and this is how much each one lost. And when you think about like the overwhelming educational funds that they gave us last year, what they fail to say is that they didn't catch up to inflation. We paid for all of the books out of that, and they set $1 billion aside for the voucher program. You know, when you put it all together and you tell people that, they go, wait a second, what? Wait, you know, so getting that information out and being willing to talk to people at the door, encourage those people that you talk to who are like, whoa, people need to know about this. Encourage them to have house parties. Invite your neighbors, invite your friends, and tell them this information so that they make the right choices for the people in their community. Because a lot of these people don't have kids. So, you know, we need to encourage them to care about their neighbors' kids.
Yeah. A great piece of legislation that I've yet to see is one that says no law can be unfunded. No more unfunded mandates, because we excel at them when it comes to education policy and law that's passed. So, and it just falls onto the local districts to try to figure stuff out, which is unfortunate, like the textbooks and like a lot of other things.
Right. And we hear teachers talking about all the time how they're filling things in their classrooms. And then I was speaking to a teacher today who was talking about how they're being forced to order supplies through one place. And so like they're given this catalog and they're like, she was like, it's so cheap. Like, what am I supposed to say to these kids that want to use their creative minds for art, and the stuff that they're using doesn't hardly work? You know, like, how are we going to keep them in that mindset of creating? Because like kids get frustrated. Kids give up when they don't have that support and they don't have the things that they need to create. So, I mean, it's even stuff like this that people don't even realize how hard this is. And then you want to add on top the banning of books in some of our schools, which we're going to get to talking about some school board stuff, right? And then, you know, teachers just having to fill in things like tissue boxes and things like that. We have a lot of families who can't afford those extra things to give to the school. I remember when I was a kid, you know, we would have some families bring in like huge boxes of tissue boxes, and then other kids, they, you know, they had one. And so we also have that lack of community coming together to support the schools and the teachers. And this is where the school boards come in. So people are not paying attention to their school board races. And we need to be talking about that more, because we see like in Hamilton Southeastern schools or in Hamilton County, how crazy it got there with their school board elections, you know, and the fact that they also want to make this a partisan thing. Which in my opinion, politics don't belong in school or public education in any way. I think that like we shouldn't be politicizing a quality, equitable education. What are your guys' thoughts on this stuff? Let me see if I can be more specific. Oh, let's see. What would you say to people? Here's a good one. What would you say to people who want to support the school, but they don't want to teach?
Run for school board.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, so that's a big one. Yes, I run for school board, and there are organizations out there that can help get you started. You know, you can get the paperwork online. There are all kinds of things that you can do, but you need to be talking about the people running for school board. There are going to be extremists and there are going to be good people. The communities need to pay attention. So if you are in a community that is hosting a school board race, my community, unfortunately, we no longer have control of our schools. Ball State has control of our schools here in Muncie. So we can't have that, but you do in your community have this, and you need to be paying attention to it. So we have a school board candidate, somebody who ran for school board. Is there some advice that you could give?
Yes. So here, I think I'd really like to hear from everyone, because school board races are so localized. Every community faces different challenges. And I think, you know, our rural communities are facing vastly different sets of challenges in terms of who's ending up elected on their school boards versus more metropolitan areas like Indianapolis. But what I could share with you as what I've seen our main challenges. When I was elected in 2012, it was the first election cycle after some special interest groups had set up shop in Indianapolis, namely Democrats for Education Reform, which, to your previous point, blurs the line of partisan politics when it comes to education. I think we need to be very wary of the introduction of partisanship into education because it's so blurred. Like there's really people are all over the place regardless of their affiliation, right? So we had Democrats for Education Reform, we had Stand for Children, we had the Mind Trust. These are largely still present today, by the way. But what we saw in that 2012 election cycle was the first, election cycle where there was a huge influx of cash spent by these organizations, and they essentially bought control of the IPS school board in one fell swoop that year. We went from the 2010 cycle where people were spending $500, $2,000, sitting around the kitchen table, walking neighborhoods with friends, groups of folks volunteering, to 2012 where I reported $78,000 on my CFA, my campaign finance reports. That was the part that y'all could go to the election board and look up and see. What you didn't see was the behind the scenes spending, because these folks have, these groups have PACs and, they can spend unlimited amounts of money behind the scenes. So I would estimate that close to around the $500,000 was spent to get me elected that first time. What I learned, folks, is that people don't spend that kind of money on you as a candidate because they think you're the best person for the job. They spend that kind of money on you as a candidate because they want you to vote in accordance with, their agenda. And so, the powerful lesson that I had to learn at my first go round was that, that they didn't elect you because they thought you were great, which, I am great. I don't have, I'm a well-qualified person in terms of education. But when I informed them that I wouldn't, vote in accordance with their wishes, we kind of had to break up. It was pretty ugly. And so not too far into serving my term, I began to write a blog and just kind of expose, what these organizations for what they were, and kind of tease apart the privatization that was happening. And so essentially in our capital city in Indianapolis with our public school district, what I can tell you is the motive is profit. And education is one. I think this is the equity issue that we'll see in our lifetime, honestly, where education, that's deemed to be public, accessible for everyone. It's a human right. All of these wonderful ideals that we have and the potential that a good quality public education has is really being busted apart by organizations that would like to capitalize off of it. Not just the special interest groups that work to get me elected, but here in Indy, it's mostly charter schools, that are really siphoning those tax dollars away from public ed. And we see, it's not uncommon to look at CEO of charter schools here in Indy and see salaries in excess of what our public school superintendent makes, in gross excess. And to be quite honest, those CEOs typically don't live here, may oversee the operation of one or two schools, whereas our IPS superintendent, oversees, over 60 schools or around 60 schools, and manages a huge budget, like all the things, right? And so it shouldn't be comparable, but it is. And so this is the fight here in Indy. This is why we have such, such money being poured into our elections here is because if they can elect folks that are charter school sympathizers that want to see that, the blurring of that line between public and tax money and all the things, then they've achieved what they've set out to do, which is to open those tax coffers up, for private profit.
May I just speak a moment about charter schools, because this is another hot button. I know that there are even people, there are people who have sent their children to a charter school only to have the charter school close within a week or two of school starting. I know that when I worked with Glenda in 2013, we were in with Bob Baining, and he told us that at that time, so keep in mind, it's been a long time ago, they had already written down $200 million in charter school loans from the Common School Fund loan pool. Now, I don't know how, I could get way down in the weeds on school finance. All I can tell you about that is the Common School Fund loan is where poor schools get their, if like their boiler goes out or something like that. They were giving charter operators, sometimes for-profit charter operators, millions of dollars with no collateral, nothing. And they would go out of business and they would just write down the debt. They would not force any kind of payment on it. And those same, in some cases, some of those same operators opened again under a different name. Now, this is a shell game that steals money from public schools. I mean, they call them public charter schools. They aren't. They are not. They are not public charter schools. They are profit-making centers for real estate investment trusts and all kinds of investors that you can hardly imagine. So when Jennifer, you all remember when Jennifer and Eddie Melton were going around on their tours, and Jennifer was saying at that time, moratorium on charter school formation, moratorium on voucher changes. And look what they've done in the 2 years. Has it only been 2 years? It seems like a lifetime. All the things that they've done, and they've had 2 sessions since then. The damage that they've done by increasing the power of charter schools and increasing the limits on vouchers. We have got to put a stop to this. Sorry.
Well, and I want to point out, because a lot of people see charter schools as a good thing, right? They're like, well, if this school is failing, why shouldn't I be able to send my kid to this? Well, what we're missing out on is oversight. People can come in, they can purchase an old school building that I believe if it's 60% unoccupied or more, they can get it for $1, right? So they get our schools, our beautiful schools that we have put so much tax money into, for $1. They can tell the state, and please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, they can tell the state, hey, I think I'm going to have about 30 kids, so I need funding for 30 kids. And then they can also say, well, we need windows, and we need this, and we need that. And they're given a bunch of money. And then all of a sudden, the end of the school year comes and they're like, well, we only had about 10 kids, so we're not going to stay. We're going to go ahead and head out. And they're allowed to just go away. And then they can come back and do it again. Is this correct? Am I correct in this? That's okay. I thought that was pretty much what was happening.
It's very much a revolving door here in Indianapolis. But I would love to hear, because I know we're from all over the state, what some of the other challenges are on other school boards, because there are, things like, book banning and and the thing that, was mentioned was some other kind of extremist types of folks that managed to get elected. So I don't know if others have, school board stories to share from other parts of the state.
I personally have never run for school board. If our school board allowed it, I would. And it does seem like more people are paying attention to it, for sure. So my fingers are crossed that we will have some people who are actually invested in the school and the community.
Chelsea, I would just add one more thing. I didn't mention specific to Indianapolis, but I think kind of generalizable to other communities as well. I think that, you know, my fear and the reason why I've gotten back into the race after an absence is because I think we're at a tipping point where, you know, the elections have been bought for all this times for, you know, 12 years or so. You know, my fear is the loss of democracy eventually if the purchasing of the seats, you know, fails to, you know, produce the results that are wanted from the privatizers. I can see a reality that's not too far off where, you know, like the superintendent of public instruction position began to become appointed rather than elected, I could see that start to take shape with our school board seats as well. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that for a second that the Indianapolis mayor's office would be, you know, take over appointing the Indianapolis public school board seats if, you know, if the threat was there where charters wouldn't be able to exist in the way that folks, you know, the folks with power and money wanted them to be able to exist.
It's a very real reality. You know, a lot of people don't understand this in Indiana. Our governor gets to appoint a lot of people. A lot of people. We've got 3 Supreme Court justices who are up this year that you guys all need to be very aware of. People who have upheld the abortion ban, upheld our trans care ban. They are up. If they are not elected again and Jennifer McCormick becomes our governor, she gets to appoint those people. So it's like, we really have to think about this with these elections as well. We've got our Republican governor who appoints people to commissions, like the commission who gave the utility companies the permission to hike their rates. These are appointed positions that need attention drawn to them. So yes, for real, if anybody has anything to say about that, I do want to, Katie asked a question in the chat. She so she said, question for the panelists, what are effective strategies? I apologize. I have a neighbor with a very loud car, and he likes to do this to all of our neighbors. Anyways, what are effective strategies to counter folks who parrot misinformation regarding education, from litter boxes in schools to the grooming allegations? If you're a candidate, what have you found to be an effective way to break through the propaganda?
So I have found this a little bit. I live in Palmyra in Harrison County, and it's a very red county. We have 100% Republican everything, even Township Advisory Board. And I will run into these fears when I talk to people in my little town. And I just point blank explain to them that is false propaganda and that they are being lied to, and that makes me upset because I care about them. And I said, this is not happening in our schools. And I name our schools and I say, my kids go to these schools. This is not happening. I'm very involved in public education. This is a lie, and you need to look at where you heard it. And I just take it in a empathy. I care about my neighbors. I love them. I don't care if they're all voting straight party ticket Republican. I care about them. They need to know they are being lied to. And I had a neighbor tell me before the primary that Obama was on his 3rd term. And I said, this is not true. And I kept going. And at first she didn't believe me. And then after I talked for a few minutes, she's like, okay, you're starting to make sense. It was like I was getting her deprogrammed. And I just have to care about them and explain to them they're being lied to. Propaganda.
Yes, meeting people where they are and understanding that we all have different backgrounds and experiences. We have people who live in Indiana whose families have voted Republican because that's just how it's always been. And so they have a really hard time breaking out of that because their personality has been tied up in a party and not necessarily who's best for the community. And so we really do, as hard as it can be sometimes, meeting people where they are and understanding that they have been fed propaganda and that it is kind of part of our duty to make sure that they have the information they need to better advocate for themselves. It's a really big deal. So yes, meeting people where they are, such a good way to reach people and get them to listen to what you have to offer.
I will reveal myself as a heartless politician who doesn't feel it's my job to educate people on some things. And so I had a guy that was talking to me about, okay, what do you think about these boys that are on the girls' swim team? Well, first of all, I said to him, I said, you know what, Bill, just think about when we were back in school. Did you ever think that something like that would ever even happen here in Seymour? My point being, it's not happening here in Seymour even now, you know, and he says, oh, no, no, we would never even think of anything like that. And then he asked me another question. So sometimes, you know, you got to think about, do you really need to talk about protecting transgender rights with someone? Or do you deflect a little bit so you can talk about things that are really happening? Because I don't see any percentage in trying to correct somebody's view about litter boxes in schools. Because somebody talked to me about that this week. You know, I don't feel like I could make all I said to that was, I can't really see a kid taking their kitty cat costume off to use a litter box. Can you imagine that? You know, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know, but that's what I heard. And so I want to talk about real stuff. And I just kind of deflect. So maybe now I'm a heartless politician to you all, but I just want to talk about real things.
No, not heartless at all. And I think that we need to be mindful of who we're really trying to talk to. And, you know, we're not out here necessarily to change minds. We're out here to make people think, hey, this is the information that you deserve to have. You didn't have it before now. Now you do. It's up to you what you do with it. And that's really all that we can do on every level. Robert, please.
I was just gonna say, I'd chime in a little bit of both of what Sarah and Trish said. That question's rather difficult to give you like the one answer, broad strokes answer of how you deal with that. You really have to take, or at least in my experience, you have to take who you're talking to, some of the markers that you might have recognized, some of the things that they might be what might be more important to them, less important, etc. And so it's really difficult to try to give you a single answer of how I might battle that, or as Trish said, deflect that. But at the end of the day, you need to break through it. You need to move around it. You need to get off the BS or the fear mongering that they've been fed, and try to get to talk back to what's important. And so it's just difficult to give you one kind of broad strokes answer that's going to hit every single voter, which is part of the ugly part of being a politician.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, one of my favorite things to say is, well, that's not happening here, but let me tell you what is. You know, they want to talk about some of these national issues, and you're talking to them about like maybe a county candidate or a state candidate, and you just have to kind of remind them, hey, we're dealing with state legislation here. These people are the people who are making rules for you at your front door. Like, we need to take this seriously, but they can't do anything about the border. You know, that's something that really comes up, is the border a lot. It comes up all the time. And sometimes I play a joke and I'm like, oh, our southern border with Kentucky, it's fine. Like, you know, just kind of joking with them a little bit. But, you know, you just have to kind of deflect. Like Trish said, you gotta, well, listen, that's not something that's happening here, but this is, you know, we got a bunch of potholes, you know. Potholes were big last year. If you were working in the municipal elections, oh my gosh, so many doors we went to. Are you fixing the potholes? Well, I'm not a part of the administration, first of all, you know, but people don't have really an understanding of what each of these offices really does. And so that's important too, for us to be educated on what to expect from our legislators so that we can start demanding it.
Can I point out what you just complained about is a lack of quality civic education amongst Hoosiers, and the entire topic we're here today is about the dumbing down and just defunding of public education. Again, I want to reiterate, I genuinely I think that's the intent. I think the goal here is to make Hoosiers as dumb as we possibly can, and that is not at all beneficial for the future of all of us. Period.
100%. And we already see it happening to our people in our communities. You know, they haven't been given what they need to succeed. And it's just, margins are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And so, you know, we all know what's happening now. So anybody who has learned something from this, please take it with you. Please talk about it to other people. We really want to encourage people to get together with their neighbors, with their communities, their friends, their family, and just make sure that they have the information that they need to advocate for themselves, and especially the children in our schools. We're sending more than 1 million Hoosier children into our public school systems, and they need the support. So I want to thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate you so much.